is my story, The Son of Jehovah versus the Cyclops. It's in my new collection of stories, Horrors and Heresies. Master, why do we cross the Sea of Galilee just to visit this desolate place? Simon Peter spoke for all the disciples, breaking the silence that had prevailed hitherto. In a few moments the capacious boat would be beaching at the water's edge. Emboldened, Andrew could nonetheless not manage to keep a quaver out of his usually hearty voice, saying, "Yes, is this not the Decapolis of the Gentiles? What business can we have among the uncircumcised?" Jesus turned from surveying the shore and answered his two chief lieutenants, "We are obliged to do the will of my Father while we may, for the night is coming when no man can work." This quizzical answer, that was no answer, set the 12 looking silently at one another, and hardly for the first time. Once a few of the men pulled the craft up onto the beach far enough that the tides could not seize it and let it float away, Jesus called them to himself and motioned them to sit in a circle on the warm sand. Then he commenced to tell them more. "Brothers, we have come to the ruins of Gergesa, long ago the dwelling of the mighty Girgashites." Lebbaeus raised his hand, and Jesus paused. "Did not your namesake Joshua vanquish them in olden times? And before that, did not he and Caleb warn Father Moses of their great stature? Men knew them also as the Rephaim, or do I err?" Jesus was visibly pleased at his disciples' knowledge of Scripture. "Blessed are you, O Lebbaeus, for he who knows not Scripture's commands cannot obey them, but woe to him who knows them and disobeys them." This left the disciple puzzled. He knew not whether his master meant to commend him or to warn him, but he reminded himself it was the way of the Nazarene to leave one guessing, lest one grow complacent. But Jesus had returned to his topic. "I have come to seek and to save what was lost. That is what brings us here, as you were about to see for yourselves." Withal he turned away and indicated a tall form running toward them. The disciples, one and all, shielded their eyes, squinting in the sun to make out the onrushing figure. He was almost upon them and did not appear to be slowing down. The 12 arose as one man, assuming a defensive stance. They would shield their master from attack, or else perish in the attempt. The savage bellowing of the wild-eyed fellow was not the only thing that made him appear like a dangerous beast, for he was quite naked and tattooed in dried blood, whether his own or another's. Manacles with hanging fragments of iron chains enclosed his wrists. None of the disciples carried weapons, but loyal Simon grasped one of the oars and launched it at the howling maniac. The muscled mountain of a man collapsed like a fallen tree. His yelling now became screams of pain. Jesus fixed Simon with a look of disappointment and scorn as both knelt beside the man. Peter's cruel javelin had gouged out one of the madman's eyes. Jesus tore a strip from his shawl and wiped away most of the blood, then took another to use as a bandage. By this time, the strange fellow had lapsed into unconsciousness. Simon Peter, now well abashed, knew not what to expect from his Lord. To test the waters, he piped up and asked, "Rabbi, will you now restore his sight, his eye?" The question only made Jesus more furious. "You think as men think. I tell you, your blindness is darker than his." The whole band of disciples cringed, sensing that Jesus meant to include them all in this stinging rebuke. What might come next? Oh, why had they followed him across the lake? "Do you not say, 'Let the pig return to the mud and the dog to his vomit'?" Peter and the rest braced for whatever was next to befall them. But in another moment the ground on which they had stood no longer bore their tread, but was instead draped in discarded clothing, amid which a dozen grunting swine rooted and nuzzled. Truly, I have thrown my pearls to you long enough. Jesus left the pigs to their business and turned again to the brute beside him. By this time the man was awakening, setting aside not only his fading agony, but also his former rage. "Who are you, man, and how came you to this awful state?" The man now possessed a surprising clarity. Propping himself upon one elbow, he wiped more blood away with his leathery forearm, then answered evenly but softly, "Once I was called Polyphemus, but now men whisper and call me Legion, for I carry the souls of the Rephaim of this ancient place. I am their beast of burden and their slave. It is my task to keep them satiated with offerings of flesh and blood, that of the nearby villagers, especially of their children. I like not to do such deeds, but if I am slow to obey, they torment me with bouts of madness, of frenzy, and the rending of my own poor flesh, as you see. Come, sir, and I shall show you." Men say that once upon a time Jesus descended into hell, but they have forgotten when and where. The truth of it is that, leaving his squealing pupils to forage, he followed the steps of his erstwhile enemy to an open tomb and entered in. Dry and crumbling bones of the ancients festooned the shadowy recess. Vague impressions in the thick layer of dust indicated where the man Legion slept, and how little rest he got, flailing and convulsing in demoniacal nightmares. There were animal bones too, some with rotting shreds of meat still clinging to them, the remains of his irregular repasts. Yet all this formed but a kind of antechamber, and Legion beckoned him further into a steeply declining shaft. It was no long journey to the bottom. Arriving there, Jesus could see that what appeared on the surface as an extensive ruined cemetery was in truth the fragmentary outcroppings of a small city buried here ages ago by an earthquake. The expanse was not completely shrouded in inky darkness because there remained great rifts and chasms through which daylight entered in random patterns. The man who had the Legion spoke as if he were a tour guide addressing holy pilgrims. "This is the ghost of Gergesso, once a city of powerful warriors and petty kings, glorious till their arrogance and perversions forced the hand of Jehovah to grind them into the dirt. Now the whole place is little more really than a vast tomb, and I, may God spare me, am its caretaker." "What keeps you here, O Legion?" "You know well enough, O Lord. The evil shades will not let me go. Once I dwelt as a young man in the village which now whispers my name in fear, the name they gave me. All their children are warned from the cradle not to venture near this woeful place, but I was so foolish as to see for myself what frightened them so. And see, I did. Much as you and your men did, I encountered the ragged guardian of Gergesa. He was old and feeble, so the ghostly inhabitants replaced him with me. But what keeps them bound to this necropolis? Their necromancy taught them many black truths, and they knew how to prolong their stay upon earth, albeit not in their proper flesh." By this time the pair of improbable companions had arrived at the half-wrecked fane of Molech, the devil god once worshipped by the Rephaim. The place was, as expected, in a state of great disrepair. Any efforts to restore the former glory of the blasphemous temple must be quite beyond the capability of the malnourished wretch who offered sacrifices when he could get them. "But why linger? Surely it is a miserable existence not to be desired. That is so, but hell is worse, and well they know that hell must be their last destination. They are able to linger here so long as blood offerings are fed to them, and for that I am needed, or one like me. O Jesus, I believe that God in his mercy has sent you here to take my place. Dim and seemingly distant voices, some moaning, some snickering and giggling, made themselves known. Their wretched servant was silent, torn between relief that his bondage soon would end and self-reproach that he had lured Jesus to his awful fate. But Jesus, finding himself in the valley of death's dark shadow, was not afraid. Nay, my hour has not yet come. But it is high time you ancient sinners vacated this abode of foulness and the haunted victim you possess. Leave him. Now the echoing chorus of the damned return. Lord, do not send us out of our accustomed land. Send us not into the abyss. Very well, devils. Outside you will find a small herd of unclean pigs. You may enter into them, and after that I guarantee nothing. The dreary expanse was at once filled with the sounds of whipping winds, amid which eerie voices could be heard shrieking, but Jesus did not feel any wind. Silence ensued, then broke again with the sobbing of the man now vacated by the legion. Weep not, O Polyphemus. Come with me to the sunlit surface before this place is razed, no stone to stand upon another. Jesus placed his arm around the scabbed shoulders of the other, and they made the climb. Once they emerged, blinking, the man besought Jesus that he might join the company of his disciples, if they still lived, for none were in evidence. But Jesus shook his head. No, my friend, I have other plans for you. You shall go forth among your Gentile compatriots, spreading the word of what the Lord God Jehovah has done for you. Your testimony will be the saving of many. You are Polyphemus, but henceforth you shall be known in shorter form as Paul. Fare you well. Polyphemus, or Paul, at once went on his way rejoicing, no longer naked, but well clothed. For a short space Jesus waited alone by the boat. It was not long before 12 naked men emerged from the lake, coughing and confused, but glad to be alive. Ashamed at their nakedness, each quickly picked out his cast-off garments. As usual, Peter spoke for the rest. Master, I know not what befell us. I dreamed my brethren and I were a herd of swine grazing hereabouts, until of a sudden we were consumed with madness and furious panic as some force overtook us like a cyclone, driving us helpless into the lake. And then we were once again men, as you see. Was it a vision from God? And has any man among you seen my clothes?
Did you create that?
Yeah.
That's like you took a lot of different things and really created that. That was really cool.
Yeah, in fact, there's at the end of it, I had a couple of.
I felt like there almost was even like the storm on the sea kind of mixed in with the pigs being, obviously falling into the water, and there's a lot there. That was interesting. And it's funny, you also took this ancient, or not this ancient, but this very heretical view that Jesus suffers in hell concept. Or he goes to hell and suffers. That there's Christians who believe that, and the fundamentalists.
Yeah, some of the passages I had in mind, 1 Corinthians 9:27, I buffet my body and lead it captive, lest having preached to others I should be myself rejected. Then in Galatians 4:15, I bear you witness that if possible you would have plucked out your eyes and given them to me. And then finally 2 Corinthians 5:2-4. Here indeed we groan and long to put on our heavenly dwelling, so that by putting it on we may not be found naked. For while we are still in this tent we sigh with anxiety, not that we would be unclothed, but that we would be further clothed, so that what is mortal may be swallowed up by life. So little bits and pieces.
I like how you made the demoniac guy Paul himself.
Yeah, and the seizing on the thing where he says, no, you're not following with the 12.
Yeah.
You're going out to preach to the Gentiles. And did you get the thing with the where Peter says, where's my clothes?
No, what?
Where did the Gerasene demoniac get the clothes? Remember, he's naked at first, but he is sound of mind and clothed. Where do you get the clothing? Well, before Peter returned to human form, Jesus gave this guy his clothes.
That is kind of weird that it would do that. And did they, writing this, have in mind something that we can't see through the words ourselves that we're looking at? You know what I mean? Does the story carry something further? Is the context of this story from an older story that might have more detail? That's an interesting thing. Why would he go from naked? If I was writing it and he was nude, but then all of a sudden, it's like, not only is restored sanity, he's also now got clothes on him. What is this? Is this some type of allegory?
Well, yes, it is. On the one hand, on the story level, it's further evidence that the guy is now sane, that he's not walking around, running around naked. But then, beyond that, Mark's gospel has this recurring image of clothing symbolizing discipleship. The kid in the garden runs away, leaving his sheet of clothing in the hands of the arresting party. If it's the same guy who shows up in the empty tomb, he's now wearing it again, so he's back to his discipleship. The Gerasene demoniac is obviously demon-possessed while he's naked, but once he becomes a believer in Jesus, he's clothed. And I think there are a couple of other ones like that as well. But the narrative link is missing. Like Mark doesn't really know or care where he would have gotten these clothes. It doesn't really fit into the story. He just needs him to be clothed and respectable looking. But I'm answering that by saying, well, those are Peter's duds. So now he's this.
It takes me back to Genesis as well. I think there's this constant theme, even with the empty tomb concept. Mm-hmm. The gardener that the woman turns to. It's like, hold on, what's going on here? So that was really well done.
I'm glad you like it.